Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Femi, and I am in desperate need of some type of pastry this morning.
I'm Josh, and I'm aching for some bacon yet again.
Now we're discussing the audience and rethink elements of our subject film, Mufasa, The Lion King. This is the A and the R in the Smart Outline, and you can listen to the first episode of the series or the last for the SM and T. Talking about the audience of Mufasa, The Lion King, Joshua, what are some of your suggestions around who should watch this? Anybody in particular of our typical audience breakdown?
Yeah, I think what's interesting thinking on this is I feel like in a sense this has a little bit of a grittier feel than maybe the original like animated Lion King, which, you know, has all like the songs and the music. And I think this one had some too. It's not even that early in the morning, but my brain isn't really running super well. But
I always wanted to brother.
Yeah, it's like, so there's still like the song element, but I think because it's that kind of like live action remake, or it's not a remake, I guess, but I think it gives a little bit of a darker feel. So I don't necessarily think that you should just be like, oh, cool, Mufasa, Lion King, 5-year-olds, great, let's do it. But that's not to say that it's like, you know, lions like tearing each other apart, you know, Watership Down style,
right?
In the Sahara. But I think it's a Disney movie. It's got some good themes, as we'll dive into in a second. I think Friends and evangelistically, I think especially with some of the dynamics about like welcoming, which is one of our questions, like welcoming outsiders and stuff like that. I think those are really good topics for Friends and evangelistically, because I feel like we're in a climate right now where we're not really sure where everybody stands on each other. Like there's not like a gut reaction to be loving necessarily. If we like meet someone that we like, I've never met you before, it's kind of like, ugh, you know, like at least that's
right
can be sometimes our default. So that's just high level for me. But for you, like, what were some things that were standing out to you that made you think this is maybe for a certain audience?
Yeah, we did watch it with our little kids, but they had already listened to a bunch of the music, and we sort of told them a little bit of the storyline. They had just last year watched The Lion King a couple times, the animated version, and we haven't watched the live action, I don't think. And so that it gave them some context of who we were talking about, and having the subject be Kiara at the beginning helped sort of play into that story. With Friends, nostalgically, man, like I was just prime age for the animated Lion King. So nostalgically, to hear more about Mufasa and sort of see the creation of it for Friends, great. Evangelistically, I think there's a little bit that in here that I would want to add. When we use these three categories, it's just typically what we're hoping that you're thinking about when you're like, who do I want to watch a movie with? If you're a parent, if you're a kid who wants to watch a movie and want somebody to sort of co-sign and say, like, Mom, Dad, I can watch this. For Friends, I think movie nights are just not happening often enough, especially as you get in your later 20s, 30s. Like, a good movie night is awesome. For evangelistically, this one doesn't have the same sacrificial element, because we'll talk about the character of Mufasa. He's never really struggling with making the right decision, you know, and so it can sometimes make people feel that, yeah, see, I'm always right in terms of I'm always making the right decision about how to treat outsiders or how to be a part of a community. So there's some elements there, but there's definitely some sacrifice and welcoming the outsider that I think is really helpful. Of like, this is a good thing. This is not a political football to be held. So there's a little bit more with that evangelistic one that I hope you all discuss offline. But as we're just thinking about our general audience breakdowns, that you can see sort of knowing the summary and the message of a movie can potentially help you figure out whether or not you want to see it with friends and discuss it. And Mufasa didn't have this turn from like, he's an evil little kid to he grew up into a responsible adult. He's just always stable. Scar, on the other hand, is probably a better evangelistic thing of like, this is sort of who you have to regret. You realize you have this internal jealousy and stuff like that. So those are some of the things I would add to that one, just to add a little more color.
All right, cool. You ready for the rethink?
Let's do it.
All right, so you brought up the outsider component, and I'm really interested in that because I think right now, kind of like I mentioned, we're in a season where we're falling into extremes where it's either welcome everybody, no questions asked, or stiff arm everybody, no questions asked. And so for you, like, what do you feel like is a middle ground of love and also protection when it comes to welcoming people in our spaces, whether it's at our church, in our homes, just into our lives? Like, what's your thought on that?
I think there's an expectation of honesty when presented with the outsider. The other factor that really matters to me is, what is your boundary? So people will say, I want to be welcoming, and they won't have a line that the person they're trying to welcome could cross for them to say, hey, you are no longer welcome. And I think it's really important of us to teach young people specifically, and for us to rethink as adults. When do I say, hey, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. We're not going to go here right now. And if you cross this line, we're going to be done for a time. And that is, I think, a better framework to have than, do I want people to think I'm nice or think I'm mean?
Yeah.
If somebody at the park is just like, hey, can I play with your kids? And they're like 4 or 5. I'm like, yeah, sure. It's like, you can play with them. If they're 34, 35, I'll be like, bruh, back up. It's not because of anything other than, like, I give you the benefit of the doubt that that's what you want, but I'm going to be there. I'm going to watch you. I'm going to be not as welcoming as I could be because I don't know why you want to play with little kids, you know? And that's just the better framework than, we always block everybody because they're going to take something from us, or we're always going to welcome everybody because they need our help. It's the posture, I think, of Christ to say, I want everyone to come close. He even allowed Judas to come close. If we're thinking about Jesus, like, even allowing Judas to come close, knowing the truth of the end of that story, to learn and to see. But there was a point where this is crossing the line.
Yeah.
Jesus knew what that was. The rest of the disciples didn't. But knowing that if you do this, you lose credibility. And I think that they ended up doing that for Mufasa, saying, like, you're welcome now, but if you risk our safety, risk our danger, or blah, 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 we're going to do that. So I think there's more of a larger framework than just that first initial. There has to be the thought of, welcoming them means this, and it has an impact here. So I need to have some type of boundary that I can't cross. You're welcome into our house. If you smash our TV, you're no longer welcome to our house. You're welcome into our house. If you hit me, disrespect my wife, disrespect, like, blah, 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 you're no longer welcome. But we want to be open first and have our boundaries ready. If you don't have those boundaries ready, I think people put themselves in a world of hurt, because then they have to react in the moment where they're already emotional to what the boundary is, and usually it's already been crossed. They're not prepared for it. So quick follow up to that question is, for me, like, do you feel like as Christians we have cultivated a culture of almost like niceness versus like Christ-likeness? I'm trying to kind of figure out my question. Really hit the middle well. Yeah, like, if you come basically to a church, like, and it's like, this is our vibe. So if you fit our vibe, you can stay, and if you don't fit our vibe, you can't. And then there's churches who are like, we want everybody to come here. We want everybody all the time. Oh, please don't do. Don't do that. But never really firm. And the mix of, we want everybody to come, but this is our ethos. And if you cross our ethos or cross our boundaries, we will talk to you directly, and if we need to, remove you from the body. And I think that, like, Matthew 18 is really good for that too, of go to a brother who's in sin, go to a sister who's in sin, tell them, then go with one person else and tell them. And then after that, you should have the other. It's sort of saying, you already need to know what the boundaries are, what those things that somebody could do are, that they're unrepentant of or whatever. And I think the same thing applies to your house, your church, your country. I'm not going to get into it, but like your country.
Yeah, I get you.
And then regarding things like if you're adopting a kid, it's the same thing. Like there's probably a boundary if that kid has violently attacked your other children where you talk to them and they're still your child, right? But you say you can't do this. And for your children, like you're adding people to your family that you don't know who they're actually going to be, and you're hoping to shape them, right? But if somebody was like really, if brother and sister are really attacking each other, brother, sister, there's some boundaries that parents as they get older have to think about of like, hey, this is unacceptable. And this is where we're either going to like call the police or whatever. So it's always hoping to be welcoming and hoping that they can be able to be known. But while you're learning and you need to know what your boundaries are while you're learning. A teacher can be really great in helping you understand something, but they shouldn't disrespect you. So there could be a line, even if you're going to a new high school or new college, where you say, hey, I will accept all things for my education, but that attitude is really impacting my ability to learn. And if that's crossed again, I'm going to bring in like my parents or other administrators or somebody. And if I'm kicked out for that, then I'm kicked out. But that's my boundary, at 17, 19, 21 of how much disrespect I'm willing to take and still try to learn from you,
Yeah. No, that's good.
You?
Yeah, man, I have just wondered, like, I feel like I've observed that specifically in Christian cultures, just being around church and, working at a Christian school and stuff, that like sometimes it seems like we're really bad at having like lovingly direct conversations. And I've been trying to figure out what that is and like what caused that, or just be, like look for evidence. And part of it is I think we have this weird framework where we're like, okay, if I say something and it makes someone mad or sad or feel bad or whatever, I'm bad and I did something wrong. And I said something that, like, oh, well, if I was really speaking the way Christ speaks, they wouldn't have had that reaction. And it's like, actually, you might actually be doing exactly what Christ would speak, because if you're saying something that in your heart of hearts, you said in love, you said it compassionately, you said directly, you didn't sugarcoat things. You also didn't make them more sharp or stern than they needed to be. And you just laid it out there and then they flip out. It's like, well, I think that's kind of revealing their character and hopefully revealing your character in a good way as well. And so when you have situations where it's like, hey, let's welcome someone in, like I actually had not an outsider situation, but I had two students who are freshmen and they joined my digital arts class that I teach. And before I let them join, I like specifically told them, hey, it sounds like hearing from your other teacher and your other elective, it's just not quite your vibe. It sounds like my class would be a little bit more up your alley. I'm open to having you guys switch in. Here are my expectations, or here's what this class is. Here's what it is not. And so then, on my part, I kind of, this is where I need to grow. It took a little bit too long to kind of address it, but for the first couple of weeks, they were on top of it. And then as time went on, the more lax/self-paced environment of my elective class kind of was abused. And so I had to have a pretty stern post-class talk where they were like to the point of literally annoying, some of the seniors and upperclassmen in the class, and tell them like, listen, we had a conversation. Do you remember what I told you? No, this. What am I seeing? This. I want you guys here. And that's the important part, I think, of that conversation of bringing up that story, is I wasn't like, keep it up and you're out. It was like, guys, I want you in here. I think you have talent. I think you can learn. I think you can do things that are going to really stand out and look cool in our school. But if you keep doing this, you're becoming something I have to manage versus someone I get to empower. And I don't enjoy that. And I don't want to do that.
That actually segues great into that second question as well of,
go for it.
When do you know when to speak up and fight? Like using the analogy, when do you know like, hey, this is now the time where I'm stepping in versus, no, I'm going to wait. I'm going to like see what's going on, or I got to get out of here. Like I got to get the principal, get parents involved, whatever. Like How do you sort of navigate those two?
Yeah, and continuing that story actually, because it kind of similar conclusion or sorry, it's still early.
Like
I'm trying to
inclusion.
get my energy drink. Yeah. I'm like blah, 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 blah. But I talked to them next couple class periods. They've been crushing it. They've been showing up. They've been asking for help. They've been doing what I asked. They've been less like messing with the upperclassmen, and they've come and they've been like, hey, are we doing better? And it's like, dudes, you guys are doing great. Like, keep it up. And so I think if, however, I had that conversation and the next couple classes, nothing had changed, then it's like, what was going through your brain when I had that conversation with you after class? And so I think that's another thing we need to be very careful of is in our quick, and this is one of the reasons, you and I joke about our whole platform of like taking forever to like talk about movies and that we don't just like jump on the latest movie that's come out, is it takes time to like think and to process and to handle things really well and patiently and fight the right fight and to fight the right fight the best way. And I think that's something that we're not living in a world that likes to do. I think we're living in a world right now, especially where speed is what matters. How quick is my take? How quick is my anger towards something, my passion towards something, whatever. And so we were actually just talking in small group about that on Wednesday, how like Jesus, when he turned all the temple tables, like our pastor made the point that he had been seeing that go on for a really long time. And it wasn't that like every time he saw it, he was like putting up his blinders and he was like, la, 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 I'm just going to ignore it. There was probably a part of him that he was like, I wonder if this is the right time to like deal with this. And it's like, you know what? I'm going to give them a chance. Maybe they will change. Maybe they will figure it out. Maybe someone else will speak up. Things keep going. They keep going. And then, we see how that happened.
Sometimes Jesus is asked to help. He's not looking for the ways to help or to get involved. I think that there's a lot of young men, especially in Christian circles and a lot in conservative circles, who feel like, oh, for me to be a man, I need to step up. And I need to step up in a big way. And Taka and Mufasa ran in this movie, but there is also are you of noble character and integrity enough that people ask you for your help? And they trust your method of slowly solving the problem instead of saying, hey, we need someone who's like a sniper. Let's get this dude in who can pull that trigger. Right. That's a way that we can solve problems differently. If we're looking for people who have shown they can solve the exact same problem well over time, who isn't eager to say, I can do it, I'm gonna do it. There's the joke that everybody who, at least in the United States, for everybody who runs for president's a little bit crazy. Because why do you want that job when that's so stressful and annoying? Yeah, you can get paid. Yeah, you can have like some secret service, but like that idea of, are you really like arrogant enough to think that you can run this thing?
Yeah.
And so there's the Jesus being asked to help families, Jesus being asked to help with the wedding at Cana. Like he's not saying like, I'm looking for the time to get involved. It's things are put in front of him and he's like, I know what to do here. And people can trust that. Speaking of that spirituality, in the last few minutes, we had 2 questions, but I think I'm going to focus on the third one with Rafiki.
Yeah.
This is like sort of, Rafiki gets introduced to us as a sort of a spiritual nut job in the movie, who gets kicked out, and that's how he meets Mufasa, Sarabi, and Taka. But what did that make you think about? Like just his sort of chill, I don't really fit. Like I'm going to keep on moving. Like, what did that make you think about? I
feel like it was an interesting image of probably not accurate to what the Old Testament prophets felt like, because a lot of them were like, why do I have to do all this crazy nonsense? Like,
right.
Please don't make me do that. But just that, I think it's interesting to think about the prophets for me, like in this context and seeing Rafiki, and especially with the first movie too, that there's this connection to a greater picture that he has, and then the cost of like being understood by the people around him. But then also seeing someone who like isn't really affected by that cost, you know, because if everyone's focused on like getting the best spot on the tree and, you know, making sure my fruit bank is full so I don't go hungry. And Rafiki's like, there's going to be a Lion King, you know, like it's just a different priority, and people don't always like people who have that different priority. And I think in the prophets, like that was their jam too, was, you know, we were focused on what God wants and telling people what they need to hear. And that is not going to make me a lot of friends or gain me a lot of followers. And that sucks, but also like it is what it is. So that was the initial reaction for me. But for you, like, did you have like a specific prophet or like a specific other character in a movie, or like what was your connection?
Yeah, I think that, again, this is just me being countercultural. I think Christians, we sometimes think something we're doing is countercultural when it's really just the same thing as everybody else in culture.
Ooh, interesting.
And one of them is like men who want to be strong now, who like want to like get ready for a fight every single time. And like Rafiki, in that sense, if this was, you know, a young man in their mid-20s thinking about speaking up at their church, they think, oh, I got to speak up. I have to be very articulate. I have to have my data. I have to have my facts. I'm going to tell my church why they're wrong about this, and this. Rafiki was really sort of nonviolent in that way, and he wasn't really argumentative. He just sort of said, I believe this wholeheartedly. And if that means I'm no longer welcome here, I believe that I'm right enough that I can leave without stress. Right? Versus, I think you're wrong, I'm out of here. Or you're wrong, you better kick me out. Like this like the idea of masculinity outside of the form of really earnestly protecting other people, to be strong, like smart, serious, sober-minded all the time, forgets that that type of person is not the person who naturally like attracts children or gets invited to parties, and Jesus was both. And so I think that I want to, if I get kicked out of my church ever, I want it to be because, man, you're doing so much stuff for the kingdom, but you're not doing it the way we want, and we just can't deal with you. Like, I'd rather that be the way that I get kicked out, because I'm bringing too many people who are too colorful, you know? Like,
yeah,
it's like,
I get you.
all these people are just too colorful, too tattooed, and weird hair, and like one of them swears in the lobby. Like, it's like, okay, well, that's probably a decent problem for a church to have. Like, why weren't those people invited earlier? Yeah, you know. So that idea is more of what I was thinking, and how I'm not that now. You know, realizing that I'm not so connected with Jesus in the Spirit and with God the Father in my following that just exudes out of me as like, what's going on with him? Even in my faith community, I think that it's great for us to pursue living radically. I'm using another pastor's word, but living radically with crazy hearts for the kingdom of pulling people in and letting them where the boundaries are, and like what this means for discipleship is where we could get into those elements.
And actually, if maybe this will be our last question, because I have a follow up to this. So something we see in Mufasa is these different tribes of lions, and we see how, depending on how they're led and depending on what their boundaries are and depending on what their goals are, that does very much shape how they treat outsiders, how they treat each other, how they treat their resources, the plans that they have, stuff like that.
Yeah.
To kind of what you said of like living radically, how do you think we are maybe missing the mark in the American church on how to, like,
and tune in to next month's podcast.
Okay.
Where we get into it.
Yeah. But because I think like that's something I've been really wrestling with recently, is just thinking through how true it is, but how what's the right word? How unaccepted it is that how you do handle things, how you set things up, what you prioritize affects how people show up and handle things and what they prioritize. And if our churches aren't welcoming people, if our churches aren't letting someone in the lobby who swears, and then maybe, you know, a loving person being like, dude, you're such a cool person. Like, what's with the language? Like, you know, like doing some of those things that lovingly set boundaries or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, where is that right now? And like, why hasn't that been, you know, maybe more of a talk
Yeah, I think we
what I
probably
see.
should do like a side episode to specifically about that. But I think that some of our desire to bear fruit focuses on the fruit and not the way to bear fruit. And so like there's a lot of Christians who are looking for the outcome of the Christian schools, the Christian teachers and Christian families living like in specifically Christian ways that can be seen, and not the methods and thought processes that are focused on the person of Christ. Things will happen slower. You know, there's a book called 3 Mile an Hour God that I want to read about just Jesus walked a lot. He wasn't running, wasn't sprinting, wasn't arguing with the church leadership of how they could do things different or the Romans. But I think a lot of Christians feel like if we can argue against the government and state and local governments for the things they're doing that are not of God, that's what God wants us to do. And so I think we've lost sometimes that in protecting our freedoms and trying to use those things, we've lost some focus on like just basic discipleship, basic friendship, and what that looks like. They could get into it a little bit more. I'm hoping if there's some pastors who are listening, wink, wink, that they can sort of think about that and talk through that of like, are we focusing on the fruit that we want to see more than the essence of how we want to live, you know?
Yeah, I think that's real good. Like, have we become obsessed with the outcome and not the work? I think that's something I've been wondering is like if our goal is, you know, and I think a lot of Christian or churches get bad raps of like, well, you just want numbers and butts and seats and blah, blah, blah. I don't always think that that's 100% true, but I do think that there is a overemphasis on like, we want conversions, we want this, we want changed lives. And it's like, dude, great thing to strive for.
Yeah.
That's going to take a lot of work, and that's going to take a lot of work, not just for the other person, but for you too. You know, for you to be patient, for you to be understanding, for you to do certain things, for you to put up with behaviors that you culturally for yourself maybe grew up thinking that like someone saying, what the hell is like the worst thing ever. And you might have to deal with that. And someone doing that in the church lobby, the sacredest of all places, you know, and you'll probably have to love them through that. And I think that is a huge part of our Christian walk, that we're so focused on results in our like American culture versus like loving the work of becoming more like Christ and loving the work of getting to know God. So
yeah, I think that's part of it. I know we're out of time this time, but let's talk briefly offline about maybe making that a whole thing we talk about.
That sounds good to me, man.